Yo, yo, yo. What is up, everyone? Today we are talking about the three most famous white grape varieties, which are Chardonnay, Riesling, and Sauvignon Blanc. These are three of the most commonly planted white grapes in the entire world, and the majority of the most famous white wines in the world are made using one of these three grapes. So understanding these three grapes is a useful starting point to understanding the more broad spectrum of the world of white wine. Now, on to grape number one, Chardonnay. One of the most popular grapes in the whole world. I think it makes the most popular white wine. And it is from Burgundy, France. That's where Chardonnay is from. That's where it originates. And it's world famous in Burgundy. White Burgundies are some of the highest end and most expensive white wines in the world. In fact, if you had to choose just one region in the world that most sommeliers would agree on as making the greatest white wines in the world, I would say 9.9 out of 10 of them will say Burgundy, France. But it is grown all over the world with world-class Chardonnay growing regions in California, where in the Sonoma Valley and Napa Valley makes world-class Chardonnay, as well as in parts of Australia, specifically Western Australia, where Margaret River makes some phenomenal Chardonnays as well. But still to this day, the most famous Chardonnays in the world are grown in its birthplace in Burgundy, France. Now, style-wise, Chardonnay tends to make wines that are dry, medium to full-bodied, and medium to medium plus acidity. The common fruit descriptors are the Pomaceous family, which is apple and pear, as well as the citrus family, which is, lemon, lime, orange, etc. Sometimes when it's grown in warmer climates, you can get some tropical tones like pineapple and mango. But again, usually that's reserved for the more warm climates of Chardonnay. Now, it's very common to age Chardonnay in oak barrels, specifically in new French oak barrels. So when you hear people talking about how they like this, this vanilla, buttery, creamy style of Chardonnay, they're usually referring to Chardonnays that are aged in new French oak barrels, because this is really important to understand is that Chardonnay as a grape variety doesn't have any of those characteristics. Those are all coming from what people choose to do with the wine, meaning do they age it in French oak barrels, or what kind of winemaking practices do they apply to it. So just because the Chardonnay bottle has a buttery flavor and vanilla butterscotch nose, it doesn't mean that that's from the grape. That's just from what they do to the grape. Really, oak and Chardonnay are almost synonymous in the white wine world because of how well Chardonnay takes to new French oak. The two most common styles of Chardonnay are going to be what I'd call the Burgundian style, or the old world style, and then what I'd call more of a California style. Now, the Burgundian style of Chardonnay it's all about balance. You're not, it's a very, very balanced white wine. It has elevated acidity, prominent mineral edge to it. It notes like, chalkiness and, kind of like a wet stone or a limestone characteristic. Fruit tonality is all in that lemon, citrus kind of notes. When you get apple notes, they're more in that green apple style instead of the very ripe yellow apple or golden apple. A little bit more tart, a little bit more verve or energy to it. Burgundian style of Chardonnay can be oaked, but again, it's if it is oaked, it's more as a balancing act rather than the main idea. It can be more moderately or modestly oaked as opposed to some of these other styles of Chardonnay that are super prominent on the oak usage. Now, on the other hand, and kind of the other extreme, is the typical California style of Chardonnay, where the oak is the focal point. I mean, it is buttery, it is very creamy, it's got a rich, sexy texture to it. There's vanilla, butterscotch, all sorts of baking spices. And then the fruit tonality, it can be much riper because it's warmer in that part of the world. So the Chardonnay takes on aromas like pineapple or mango, in addition to the apple notes, which are now, instead of that green Granny Smith, they're more in that ripe. Sometimes you can even find some, yellow pear kind of notes, or quince, Quincy Jones. Anyway, the tropical tones are more present in the warmer climates like in California and Australia as well. Now, the acidity and the minerality that is so prominent in the, let's say Burgundian style, it does kind of take a backseat to the oak. So usually the acidity is a little bit more diminished compared to Old World Chardonnay. And same thing with the minerality, is that you can lose a touch of the minerality because of, how much other stuff is going on, namely how much oak is on the wine. Whereas, let's say in Burgundy, the main idea of Chardonnay is balance, and the main idea for a lot of what I'd call the traditional California approach, the main idea is opulence and power. Now, if there's one big note about Chardonnay, is that a lot of people will say, oh, I don't like Chardonnay because I don't like how buttery and creamy it is. Now, remember what we just talked about. You only dislike one specific style of Chardonnay, because Chardonnay can be made into so many different styles that it's really an error to write off not liking all Chardonnay just because you don't like that buttery, rich, creamy style. On to our next grape variety, and it's one of my absolute favorite grapes in the entire world, and probably the most misunderstood grape varieties out there, and that's Riesling. A lot of people, especially people that are new to wine, think that Riesling is just a cheap, light, watery, sweet white wine that no serious wine drinker drinks, and that could not be farther from the truth. In fact, Riesling makes some of the world's greatest white wines and some of the longest lived white wines as well. The Riesling grape hails from the Rhine region in Germany, and that's where the most famous examples of the grape are made. Other world-class Riesling producing nations include France, where it's the most noble grape in Alsace on the eastern part of France, in Austria, in Australia, in South Australia, in Clare Valley, in Eden Valley, it is making stunning examples of Riesling as well. So Riesling will make either a dry or off-dry white wine, so they're not all sweet, and in fact it's very common to make dry Rieslings, but for some reason people only think of Riesling as being sweet, which is not exactly the case. There are both sweet and dry examples of it, and any assortment of styles in between. So they make dry or off-dry white wines, light in color, light in body, with searing acidity and tons of minerality, and a really amazing pronounced fruit flavor to it, from what's a very, very aromatic grape variety. I mean, Riesling will just jump out of the glass and charm you with its aroma. Now, another really unique note about Riesling is that it takes on minerality very well. So it really has this pronounced stony, limestone, wet river stone kind of character to it. And with age, almost all Rieslings take on this really unique gasoline or petrol-driven note that is unique to the Riesling grape variety. Now, the two main styles of Riesling that I would kind of categorize would be the typical German off-dry style. I'd say that that's the most famous style of Riesling, but also, as I mentioned, there's world-class dry Rieslings as well. And there's a pretty big differentiation between the two. So the more traditional German style is what I'd call off-dry German Riesling, and it is light and crisp and tons of minerality, and it's very fruity, and it's, peach and apricot and lime and yellow apple, and there's just this tension and this verve to it. The wine has very low alcohol, so it's very easy drinking, and the sweetness is really masked by the great acidity and minerality, making for an incredibly balanced and very easy drinking white wine. On the other hand, the drier version of Rieslings are packed with power because they don't sacrifice any of the acidity, but they also are usually about 3 or 4 percentage points of alcohol higher than the off-dry cousins. So there's more power to it, there's more viscosity and weight, while still maintaining the same aroma. You still get peach and apricot, and you still get the lime zest and the limestone. You get all the same aromas, but none of the sweetness. So it's a little bit more heavy, a little bit more powerful style. So finally, the third grape that we're going to talk about today is Sauvignon Blanc. Now, Sauvignon Blanc has just boomed in popularity over the last 2 decades. And a lot of that has to do with just the unbelievable success story of New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc and its mainstream appeal all across the United States. You cannot go to any grocery store in the United States without finding 10 different examples of New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc. You can even go to the gas station, and it's one of the most commonly found white wines at gas stations is New Zealand style Sauvignon Blanc. Sauvignon Blanc originally hails from the Bordeaux region in France, and it's kind of overlooked because Bordeaux is just so associated with some of the most famous red wines in the world that the white Bordeaux, the Sauvignon Blanc grown there, sometimes gets overlooked. Now, the two most famous places for Sauvignon Blanc in the world are in the Loire Valley in France, in Sancerre, which is probably the most famous village in the world for Sauvignon Blanc, but also equally as important as on the South Island of New Zealand in a region called Marlborough. Now, Sauvignon Blanc typically makes wines that are dry, light to medium bodied. Sometimes they can take oak, but it's more common that they're done in stainless steel because the wines are very aromatic and they have a high fruit character. And there's also sometimes a bit of a grassiness or a green note that some people would call like a bell pepper or like freshly mowed lawn. Just like Riesling in that it's very aromatic, it has a high intensity of aroma, so it'll just jump out of the glass when you smell it. The fruit characteristics for Sauvignon Blanc are primarily citrus driven, where lemon, lime, grapefruit, just about any citrus note is common in Sauvignon Blanc. But depending on where it's grown, tropical notes like guava or gooseberry or kiwi are also quite common. Now, there's a few dominating styles of Sauvignon Blanc. I think the two most common would be from Sancerre, from France, and then also from New Zealand. And the classic Sancerre style is to be very light and dry and very mineral driven, almost like a flintiness or a, wet stone characteristic. The fruit tonality is going to be all citrus driven, just ripe lemon, lime zest. There's going to be a bit of that pronounced green bell pepper note, and some people even smell freshly mowed lawn. And it's common to be done in stainless steel. It's not very common to have any oak in a Sancerre. Most Sauvignon Blanc, I'd say maybe 75 to 80% of the Sauvignon Blanc in the world is stainless steel and it's very crisp and fruity and aromatic, but the ones that do have some oak on it, you'll likely see the words Fumé Blanc to denote that oak character. So that's about it, guys. I mean, these are by far the three most famous grape varieties. They are a perfect launch pad to start your understanding of the world of wine. Just having some basic knowledge on what the characteristic differences are between these three grapes is a great starting point to launch you on your journey of learning the white grapes of the world. So thanks for tuning in, guys. Drop me a comment, leave me a like, subscribe if you haven't already, and look forward to the next video where we're going to do the same thing but with the most famous red grape varieties to give you a little bit of background on that. So cheers, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Stay healthy, stay inside, don't do anything crazy, and cheers. We'll see you on the next one.